it's Matt Sayers here, and today I am back in r/ProRevenge for day number 26. I cannot believe that as of recording this, literally it's the 1st of October recording this, and I'm almost at the end of ProRevenge. Like, of the ProRevenge section of this whole list, which is October. Oh my god, that's just so ridiculous to think about. Today, I have two stories lined up. One where someone's just like, I'm gonna steal your design and take all the credit for it. And the other, we're gonna do some mathematics for the title. First, let's start off with steal my design and get all the credits. Enjoy getting kicked off. So my friend over in Korea studies fashion design. She sometimes sends me over the sketches of the designs, and they all look amazing. Then again, I'm not into fashion. She is particularly interested in designing handbags and purses. She told me a story about how she shut down one of the most entitled, self-centered, lazy students on campus. Cast: Grace, main character girl. Jane, the evil one. Professor, the instructor of the course. At first, Grace and Jane got along just fine. They were both interested in similar stuff and quickly became BFFs. Grace decided to show Jane her sketches and designs for handbags and purses, and Jane was so impressed by it. Because the sketches were in incredible detail, including all the patterns and sew lines, coupled with figurative measurements. Even Professor was impressed by it, and it was no surprise that Grace had got a high mark in their first major exam. Jane didn't do so well, and practically followed Grace everywhere to get pointers on how to do better. So Grace decided to help her out. Unfortunately, Jane turned out to be one of the most entitled, lazy, and selfish people that Grace has ever met. Things that Jane did to piss Grace off included, but not limited to, not paying attention, being late on their study session, never showed appreciation, didn't pay for coffee or snack, complaining annoyingly about how hard it was to draw something. Grace pretty much gave up on her after a week, refusing to meet Jane outside of her class. Time went by, and for their midterm, everyone in class had to do a presentation on the stuff they had designed. When it was Jane's turn, Grace was shocked to see Jane had stolen one of her designs. Thankfully, Grace had multiple designs going on, so there were no conflicts when it was her turn to present, but she was seething with rage. Grace had a meeting with the professor afterwards, and the professor knew what was going on, but couldn't really do anything with Jane, because it turns out she was the daughter of the chairman, or one of the major investors. Grace said she can't recall. The chairman apparently blackmailed the professor into giving Jane the best grades. The revenge. Professor did, however, help Grace devise a plan to humiliate and expose Jane. For the finals, the professor announced to the class they would do another presentation, but it would be 3 designs, and advised they had to bring their A games because professionals from industries would be grading their work, and the head of the department and the chairman would be there as well. So you know how Grace has had a bunch of sketches for the class? Well, Grace also had a separate sketchbook that had designs from major brands. MK, Coach, you name it. She never used these directly for class assignments, but rather as inspirations for her designs. Grace pretended to be all friendly with Jane again, and brought the other sketchbook on their meetings, still putting up with all the problems mentioned above. Grace secretly worked tirelessly on her new design, and did her best to keep it a secret from Jane. So the day of the final presentation arrives, and Grace and Professor are grinning because they know what is about to happen. The last one to go was Jane. Jane's presentation turned out to be another copycat, copying designs of not 1, not 2, but 3 different companies. After the presentation, this was how it went down. At least according to Grace. So, you are saying you designed all these by yourself. right? That's right. And you swear it was really your design and didn't copy off from anything else, right? I swear. You are aware your designs are from free brands, huh? Are you aware that these are on market right now and some of the most popular designs? Wait, hold on. Yeah, I was going to bring this up. If you had worked for any brands, you would probably been fired or, worst case, sued. But, please, I am not done yet. Did you honestly think this would work? We, the judges, have been in the industry for over 10 years. We know a copycat when we see it. But these aren't even my designs. They are from Grace. To Grace. Is this true? Yes, but I never use them for major projects nor call them my work. I just use sketches of them as inspirations for my own designs. Well, that was clear from your presentation. Turning back to Jane. Now, Miss Jane, this is a clear case of plagiarism, and I do hope your school is merciful on this matter. After the presentation was over, the chairman screamed at the professor in front of everyone, not realizing he just revealed all the blackmailing and the secret grade deal. Jane tried to call out Grace on how you screwed me over, but it really didn't matter. No one listened to Jane's attempt and slander and was kicked out of the school. Chairman was pretty much lost all support and had to resign and was replaced by a far more honourable and competent one. Edit. It's only been... Oh. No, okay. I'm going to just skip the edit part. Like, if you're going to steal a design, make sure you know that the design is not based on an actual design that exists on the market of what you're trying to get into. Seriously. Do your research. Although, when you got entitled people, they're also lazy, they don't do the research, or they expect you to do everything for them. Let's move on to some mathematics. 2 malicious compliances equals 1 ProRevenge. This is being posted under my alt, as some of my people know my main Reddit username, and I was never in it for the karma. Several years ago, Barry, my boss, did a job for Big Daddy Construction and got screwed. It wasn't a huge amount of money, a couple of $1,000, but screwed is screwed. Basically, he accepted Big Daddy's word on something that they denied later. Barry consulted his lawyer and was told that since the issue was not in writing, any legal action was likely to fail, and even if he won, that the legal costs would exceed any settlement. And Big Daddy basically said, my lawyer can beat up your lawyer. I just love the name of the company that you've used, Big Daddy. Barry then asks what every lawyer likes to hear. What should I have done differently? Fast forward to 2017. Big Daddy is soliciting bids for a new restaurant called Fancy Ass. Oh, you are coming up with the best of names. Barry submits a bid for supplying and installing door hardware. Things like doorknobs, emergency exit bars, door closers that pull the door shut, and 3 automatic door openers, ADOs. An ADO is something you have seen before. It has a metal plate with a wheelchair logo mounted on the wall. When you press it, a motor opens the door. It's designed to allow people with limited mobility to pass through a doorway. Barry wins the bid and calls a meeting. He is handling this job personally. All communication with Big Daddy is to go through Barry and only Barry. If someone from Big Daddy calls and says, "Nice weather, isn't it?" we are to reply, "I wouldn't know anything about that. Let me transfer you to Barry's line." Under no circumstances is anyone from Big Daddy to be given Barry's cell number. And the after-hour on-call texts are only to return the call and say that Barry will be in touch in the morning. Violation of any of this will be grounds of immediate dismissal for courts. Is this perfectly clear? A few weeks go by and we get a call from GC, who is not only running the job for Big Daddy, but is Big Daddy's son. He is an entitled shitball of a tyrant with anger issues and a vocabulary that relies heavily on profanity. I'm calling him GC because that's his job title, General Contractor. For those who don't know, a GC is responsible for ensuring that everything gets done on a construction site in the correct order. For example, if you are building a bathroom, you first put up the wall studs, then the electrical is run and the plumbing supply lines are roughed in. Next, the drywall goes up, then the tile, and the baseboards. The walls, ceiling, and trim get painted, then the cabinets, light fixtures, and switches are installed. Lastly, the plumbing fixtures go in. So you can see GC has to deal with several different subcontractors and coordinate their efforts. It's a stressful job, and you need the cooperation of the various people. And it's hard to get people to work with you if you're screaming swear words at them, something GC never figured out. This might be a good time to give you a visual of the restaurant layout. This by no means is to scale, just a sketch to give you an idea of what's going on. Okay. Makes sense to me. Yeah. Yeah. Not the best sketch I've seen, but I'm not gonna just knock it points. It's a rough sketch of what the layout was for the restaurant. There are 3 ADOs to be installed, 2 on the entrance and 1 on the handicapped washroom. The conventional washrooms are down a flight of stairs on the right, and by law, there has to be a washroom available for people using wheelchairs, marked as HC on the drawing. This is on a bit of a corridor of sorts, used by the servers to bring food in and dishes out. The partitions separating the corridor and are about shoulder high, separating the corridor from the seating area, which is what the circles with 4 chairs represent. These are tables, booths, etc., with a smattering of service stands for order, entry, and bits and pieces like extra cutlery. The decor was fancy and meant to resemble a Victorian gentleman's club, with oak throughout and thick carpets on the floors. Worthy of mention is the feature wall at the front, with alcoves for displaying sculptures and places to hang paintings. So GC calls us, and they are ready for the ADOs. We arrive and install. By the terms of the bid, it's Big Daddy's responsibility to supply dedicated 120 volt electricity for the ADOs and to run the 12 volt wires from the activation plates to the top of the doorway so they can be connected to the circuit board for the ADO. This wasn't present at the time of the install, so we ran an extension cord to power the ADO and used a wireless transmitter and receiver to trigger it. All this was specified in the bid, which said that we could install and then return to hook up the wires once they get run. Barry came and supervised the tech installing the ADOs personally. When GC signed off, buried in the description was a line to referring the relevant sections of the bid. When GC signed off on the handicapped washroom install, there was a line noting that Big Daddy assumes all responsibility for compliance with the relevant building code selection. GC didn't bother to read what he was signing, just scribbled a signature and took his copy. Barry made certain the tech was right beside him when GC was signed off. So, this is malicious compliance number 1. It's about 2 weeks before opening, and they are in the finishing stages. Barry gets a frantic call from GC that none of the ADOs are working, and they need to be functional, or they won't get their occupancy permit. permit. Barry heads down the next day with the tech. Well, I found the problem. So fix the fucking problem. There's no 120 volt run to the doors, and there's no 12 volt wires to hook up the buttons. You didn't run the power? Why didn't you run the power? It's not in the scope of work in the bid. You're supposed to do it. Why didn't you tell me that when you were here the first time? I did, and you signed off on it. Where's the fucking electrician? Electrician, get your ass over here. What's up? Why isn't there any power for these door operators? It's not part of my scope of work. There's some good news. What? If we use wireless for the buttons, we won't need 12V wires. I'll have to bill you for it as it's an add-on, but once you get me 120V, these ADOs will be working. GC realizes how fucked he is. The interior of the restaurant is 90% complete, and there is no power to a critical part of the building. Without it, no permit. Big Daddy has fucked up big time, assuming that Barry or the electrician would run the wires, not putting it into the scope of either bid. The electrical panel is in the back of the kitchen, and there's no way to bring 120 volts to the front entrance, except across the ceiling, which would be nearly impossible. All the lighting and ornate false ceiling was already in. Even if he was able to magically do that, he would either have to run a metal conduit down the surface of the feature wall, or rip out a good chunk of it, run the wires, and reinstall it. The handicapped washroom ADO wasn't as much of a problem, since it was closer and the wires could be run through the false ceiling. The section that contained the handicapped washroom also had offices and a storage with a T-bar ceiling, unlike the main room that had 20-foot ceilings. The electrician charged GC big dollars for the extra work. Malicious compliance number 2. Remember the handicapped washroom? When the building inspector came to do a pre-check, they discovered that the square footage of the bathroom, minus the area taken up by the in-swinging door, was less than the required minimum. They needed a quick fix, as dismantling the washroom, moving a wall, and relocating the plumbing fixtures would be too expensive and would take too long. So GC decided to reverse the swing of the door and have it swing into the corridor rather than into the washroom. This had a really bad effect on the operation of Fancy Ass once it opened, as anytime someone went to use the restroom, the door blocked the flow of servers in and out of the kitchen. And people are lazy. Even able-bodied people are prone to using this washroom as it was closest. I don't know what the conversations between Fancy Ass and Big Daddy were like, but I imagine they were pretty intense. But who gives a fuck? GC signed off on that too. And Barry got an invoice for a whole new ADO, as the original was a pull style and reversing the swing meant the push style was required. The ProRevenge. GC called a few days after discovering that the entrance doors needed 120V to tell Barry that the 120V was available. Barry heads down to the tech to check it out. In the vestibule was a heater known as an air curtain. It's a big heater designed to push a high volume of warmed air into the vestibule to mitigate cold outside air entering the restaurant. It pulls a significant amount of electricity every time it kicks on, and GC had tied the 120V for the entrance door ADOs into the same circuit. Barry explains that the bid specified that the ADOs required their own dedicated circuits, one for each. GC responds that he doesn't give a shit, hook the damn things up, so Barry does, and has GC sign off again. This time, buried in the sign-off sheet is an acknowledgement that by not providing dedicated circuits, all warranties are void and subsequent service will be billable. Just like usual, GC scribbles his signature and takes his copy without reading it. These ADOs are finicky about power. There's a motor, obviously, controlled by a circuit board that determines how fast the door opens, how long it stays open, and how fast it closes, how much force is used, that sort of thing. If it takes a spike of power, it fails, and the ADO no longer functions. A powerful spike blows a fuse and damages one of the components of the control board. This is replaceable, and the part is worth about $30. The control board can be fixed in about half an hour, with another half hour on a scope to make sure everything is good. Barry had sent one of the techs to the manufacturer to be sent in rebuilding the board, even though our standard was just to ship them back to the manufacturer and get a replacement. Sure enough, a couple of days later, GC calls it a panic. They have the final occupancy inspection scheduled for the next day, and one of the ADOs is at the entrance is down. GC, your fucking ADO isn't working. Get down here and fix it. Okay, but this isn't covered under warranty. It's billable. What the fuck are you talking about? It's not even been a week and it's broken. It's warranty. Nope. Warranties were all voided when you didn't provide clean power. Fuck that. Get down here and put in a new ADO. It doesn't need a new ADO. It needs a new control board. And I can get a new control board from the manufacturer in 4 to 6 weeks. GC loses his mind. There's no way he can delay the opening of Fancy Ass for 6 weeks waiting for a part. He calls Barry every name in the book, friends, legal action, etc. Barry responds, look, GC, I have a control board on the shelf that was rebuilt by a factory certified technician. I can let you have it at 80% of the list price of a new one, and I can have it installed by noon tomorrow. Do you want the rebuilt or the new part? And do you agree that this is billable as per the terms of the grid? Yes! Just get the fucking thing fixed by tomorrow. Now Barry knows that GC and Big Daddy were just going to fuck him, just like they did years ago. That ended up being a I never said that dispute. And what GC didn't know was every time he called Barry, the call was recorded. You know, this call may be recorded for quality assurance purposes that you get when you dial in. Well, Barry has never used his cell phone, never initiated a call, and every time GC called in, it was recorded and archived. Every single time. Sure enough, another couple of days go by, and an ADO goes down again. Barry asks if GC is good with the rebuild, gets confirmation, removes the blown part, installs the rebuild, then takes the blown control board to the shop and rebuilds it. A new control board is $750. The rebuild he's charging is $600 for a part that maybe costs $75 to get back into shape. The bid specified that non-warranty service was $125 per hour, minimum 4 hours. So tack on another $500 for labor, and it takes maybe 45 minutes to install a control board and dial it in. So every control board replacement was generating $1,100. There are 27 blind control board swaps in the first 2 months. GC called in every one of them, and Barry got his verbal approval. If someone from Fancy Ass called in, we gave them GC's number and said that we could only come and fix it if GC was the one to call it in. Then Barry gets a call from Daddy of Big Daddy, wanting to know what this invoice for almost 30 grand is for. Barry explains, and the meeting is called. Barry brings his lawyer and all copies of the sign-off sheets, as well as transcripts of every conversation he had with GC. It becomes very apparent that GC fucked up large, and that Barry had every I dotted and every T crossed. Big Daddy is glaring daggers at GC and basically tells Barry that if he wants to get paid, he's going to have to sue for the money. Barry smiles and slides his ace across the table. The contractors lien against Big Daddy, Fancy Ass Restaurant, and massive realty company, the owners of the building. Here's the thing, Fancy Ass was owned by internationally famous chef, IFC, who makes his living getting very important people to invest in opening a new restaurant. This is a place where they go to be very important and bring their business contacts with them. After a short time, when the restaurant is the happening place in town, the investors sell the place and cash out large. IFC sticks around, helps with the transition, and makes a percentage of the restaurant's profits for the use of his name. He's built an income stream with the investors' money, and the investors make a nice return. Only now they can't sell with a lien on the place. And these investors have rabid fucking pit bulls as lawyers. Hell, some of them are lawyers. See you in court, Big Daddy. Only you're not facing Barry's lawyer, you're facing a whole new level of legal expertise. Have fun with that. Barry got his revenge and then withdrew service based on the disputed invoice. He's the only company allowed to service and install this brand of ADO, and he has protected territory from the manufacturer and does 7 figures worth of business with them a year. The only other companies anywhere nearby were warned off by the manufacturer, who even relayed the fact that Big Daddy had called them directly looking for service, and they referred Big Daddy to Barry. Barry will definitely get paid, as it's a standard to hold back 10% of the year payment to a construction company for a year, and the holdback will definitely cover the invoice. So fancy artists will pay Barry and then take it out of Big Daddy's holdback. Either that or they will sue Big Daddy into dust and force Big Daddy to cough up and sell the land. Who knows what company Big Daddy picked up to cover the ADOs. Barry has friends in the industry and warned them all off, but there are arsehole competitors and Barry didn't say a thing to them. Maybe Big Daddy is screwing over one of the competition, and what hurts his competition helps Barry. What makes this deliciously pro? You think maybe, just maybe, Barry, who has decades of experience in the industry, might have had an electrician friend that could show him the electrical bid. I don't know why I cannot speak. And that maybe Barry knew from the beginning that there was no provision for 120 volt in either package, or that the washroom was too small, or that GC corner cutter would take the easy way out and hook the ADOs into the air curtain. Way to go, Barry. Nicely played. TLDR, subcontractor complies with a bid to the letter and covers his ass in all correspondence. General contractor ends up paying big dollars for their error, allowing subcontractor to recover money he was screwed out of years ago. Oh, yeah, I love it when a person's just like, I'm going to cut corners and make my life easier, when it doesn't make your life easier, and it makes it much more of a hell in the end. You only cut corners if it actually is a smart idea. If it actually makes business better for everyone. And on that note, I'm going to end this episode here. Links will be in the description to my main channel and also the second channel that you're on right now, where there's links to the playlist and the last episode on screen. Go check them out. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when the next video comes out. A ding, a ding. I'm Mad Scientist. Mad Scientist out.